How has COVID changed the economy? Joe Calhoun explains.
Well, that's a pretty big question, Bob. I think it's changed it pretty significantly. The changes, I think, and what I wrote way back when COVID was first starting, was that what COVID did really was more than anything was it accelerated some trends that were already in place. And what we're going to go through today is some stuff on consumption. I'm going to show you how COVID accelerated these existing trends. So I think people have this idea that things changed dramatically because of COVID, and they did in the short term. But really, again, like I said, all they really did in a lot of ways was extend some trends or keep some trends going that were already in place. So remember a couple of weeks ago, we went through that whole, we had a video about how what interest rates we're going to do, where are interest rates going to go. Part of that discussion, we talked about productivity. Ultimately, nominal GDP growth is about productivity growth and workforce growth and inflation expectations. And so we were using that as a way to arrive at kind of an estimate of where our 10-year Treasury note yield should be. But in the course of that conversation, we talked about productivity and how that period from 2010 to 20, that decade, had the lowest productivity growth since World War II. And as a result, we had lower real GDP growth as well. And we can see that we had low nominal GDP growth. We also had low real GDP growth. And you can see that on this chart here, that if we start back here in 2000, we draw a trend line in for real GDP growth. We can see that prior to, or at least from 2003, after the recession was over, this is really where the bear market ended, by the way. It's kind of interesting that the real GDP actually picks up, and then, believe it or not, the bear market ended, and suddenly everything was fine. But you can see we were above trend right up to 2008, and then 2008 knocked us for a loop. And it took all the way out here to 2017 to get back above trend. And so then 2020 comes along, COVID comes along, knocks us for a loop again. But look what's happened since COVID. Really starting really in early 2021, we passed above the previous trend line, and we've been above it ever since. And we're quite a bit above trend here. And if productivity growth continues, that's going to continue as well. But I don't want to talk about that necessarily today. I want to zero in on a piece that is something that I think a lot of people think about is consumption. And we have had some changes in the way we consume as well. So real personal consumption expenditures. Now, this is real. This is personal consumption adjusted for inflation. So it's this is talking about the number of widgets, not the price of the widgets. It's just how many widgets did we consume. Now, in this case, it's services widgets as well as goods widgets. So it's not just widgets. But point is that we had this big drop off in consumption during the shutdown phase of COVID, obviously. And then it started to come back, and it came back and it got above trend starting in the spring of 2021. And it's never come back below trend. It has continued at this pace. It's you can see it just barely varies on a month-to-month basis. So consumption has returned to above trend, and you can see, and if this extended further back, you would see that prior to 2008, when we went below trend, you would have seen consumption pretty much above trend for that period from 2000 to 2008, and then below trend again, just like with real GDP, and then you didn't get back above the trend until 2017. So point is that consumption has recovered quite nicely and quite quickly. And the question is why? Well, I think the answer is obvious. It's government spending. And in particular, during COVID, it was all the relief programs from, the checks that they sent out to individuals. It was also the Paycheck Protection Program. It was the restaurant rescue program. It was, any number of items. And then Biden came in early 21 and passed his own thing that popped us above trend and kept us there. But the point is that a lot of this has to do with government policy. But for now, it is what it is. Now let's look at goods. This is really interesting. Goods consumption fell off. Everything fell off right during that shutdown phase, which was really just a few months, about 3 or 4 months, where we really kind of shut down. By the summer of 2020, we were starting to get things going again. But the hard shutdown at the beginning really killed consumption. But then goods consumption took off. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Goods consumption, what were people doing? They couldn't go to dinner, they couldn't travel, they couldn't do all the things they normally do on the service side of the economy, but they had money because people were still working, and government had, topped that off in a lot of cases. And so what happened was you had this surge in goods spending. A lot of it was based on the house, people buying computers and video equipment because they needed to do Zoom videos because they're going to work from home more. They bought a hot tub. They put in a pool. They did all these things around the home because suddenly they were stuck at home. And so this real surge right here, which is this is the Biden's program that he passed in the spring, in March of 2021. I forget what it was called. It was just another government spending program, another handout. But whatever it was, it had a huge impact on consumption at that point on the good side of the economy. But that was the peak. Now, here's what's interesting. You see, you fell off some and then you went sideways. But now, and I'm not sure you can really see this on this chart, but we just surpassed this peak. Just last month in September, actually that's 2 months ago, I guess, we just got the report. We actually surpassed this peak. So goods consumption is actually accelerating again, contrary to what people were thinking, I believe. So that's what happened with the goods side of the economy. And you can see this is a percentage of total consumption. This is the goods portion of the economy as a percent of total consumption. You can see you're running here about 31.5% prior to COVID, and suddenly you jumped all the way up to 37% with that last Biden top off on everybody's stimulus, or whatever you want to call it. And then as a percentage, it's fallen back, and now we're running at about 35, a little under 35%. But what's interesting here is, again, remember what I said? I think that when I wrote about this way back when COVID first started, I said that this was that what COVID did was accelerate a lot of existing trends. Well, look at this. Goods consumption was rising as a percentage of total consumption way before COVID. That started way back actually in 2009. And so we see this acceleration, but now what's happening is that as a percentage of the economy, I think what you're going to see is it's probably going to stabilize here for a while before starting to head up again. So let's look at the services side of the economy. Services side did something similar, except it took longer. We had this big drop off, and it was a huge drop off in services consumption during the shutdown phase, but you did recover. And you recovered, but you can see you didn't recover back above the trend until the summer, actually the fall the fall and winter of 2021. And it was really not until 2022 that you really got up here and started to motivate. So the services side recovered, but it recovered after the goods consumption recovered. So there's a little bit of a lag there. And here you can see, again, percentage of total consumption. And you can see, look at this, you were up here around almost 72% right after, at the end of the previous recession. It was in decline the entire time. And what COVID did was accelerate this trend. And now it's leveled off, and you're at about 65.5%. 60, I forget what the exact number is, but it's a little above 65%. If you think about it, a little above 65, a little below 35, that adds up to 100. So again, I think what's going to happen here, and if you look at this, actually, if you were able to draw on a trend line here, it's pretty close to trend. It's still under the trend a little bit, but it'll come back up, and I think that, or it'll go sideways for a while until the trend catches up. But the point is that this looks like it's permanent. This is not something that's a one-time thing and it's going to be over with. I think this trend was in place, and I think it's going to continue. So here we can see this is real goods consumption, let's just talk about where the change in goods consumption came. The blue line is durable goods. Now, durable goods are things that last over 5 years, expected to last over 5 years. Things like washing machines, TVs, and cars, and things like that. Versus non-durables, which would be things like, clothing, for instance. And you can see what's happened here. After your big surge, and a lot of that surge was in durable goods, and then it pulled back, and non-durables has just gone sideways, and now durables has taken off again. And you're not quite back above this peak here, but you're getting close. So the change is in durable goods, not in non-durables. That's quite interesting in that the people are buying things that are big ticket items. We were talking earlier about how the goods part of the economy recovered first and the services recovered later. And, I don't know if you remember, but last year, all the people that were negative on the economy kept talking about, oh my gosh, inventories are rising. And you might remember too, Target and Walmart both had inventory issues that they had to resolve. And so there was a lot of concern last year. I think one of the reasons there was so much concern last year about a recession is that that's something you normally see prior to recession. You see inventories build up. But in this case, this was COVID related in that a lot of companies during COVID, they were unsure about their supply chain. So they might have ordered 1.5 times what they really would have normally ordered, or maybe even 2 times what they normally ordered. And that was fine for a while. Goods consumption was booming. It was fine. Then the goods consumption kind of peaked and started to come down. And then all that extra inventory started coming in. And so they found themselves with this inventory overhang. And so a lot of people that watched the economy were really worried about the economy, worried about recession because of this inventory buildup. But what they missed was that the services side of the economy was still recovering. So you had a slowdown in the goods side of the economy, but the services side made up for it. And that's why you remember last year, you had those first 2 quarters last year where GDP was basically zero. You had a couple of quarters that were really minor negatives. That's what that was. That was the inventory correction. Services was able to make up for almost all of the slowdown of the goods side. Well, now this is retail inventory to sales ratios. What we look at here is the inventory relative to how sales are going. And that way you don't have to worry about adjusting it for inflation because you're comparing apples and apples there. So what we see is that the inventory to sales ratio right now is under 1.2. And you only had a couple of times where it got below 1.2 in this whole period here. And it's way below where it was in the 2000s. Now, that's some changes in technology in a way, because this is kind of just-in-time inventory. But it's interesting. Everybody talks about how, oh, well, companies, and I've said this too, I expected that companies would hold more inventory than they did in the past because they're worried about things like another COVID coming along or something like that where, oh my gosh, I don't have enough goods to sell. But it's not happening. And if anything, inventories are quite lean. This is inventory, retail trade inventories, inventory to sales, excluding motor vehicles and parts. And I did that for a reason. You can see if you exclude automobiles, it's still a low number and it's below normal. Here's the number with this is just motor vehicles and parts. And you can see it's still way below where it was pre-COVID. Now, look, there's some things going on here. We're talking about changes in the economy. Auto dealers, there was a point there where they didn't have any cars. I remember a couple of years ago, we went to get a car, and there was really only a couple I buy Volkswagens. I've been buying them since 1987. The little plug for Volkswagen there. We went to buy a new Volkswagen, and there was like 2 on the whole lot. Remember, there was a chip shortage. You couldn't get cars. Anyway, the point is inventories dropped down to almost nothing. And now they've started to recover, but even now they're still way below where they were. So what does this mean? Well, consumption is really healthy. Why is it healthy? It's healthy because household incomes and their balance sheets are really, really healthy too. Real disposable personal income is well above where it was pre-COVID. I forget the exact numbers, but you're talking about a 7%. Well, let me put it this way. From 2020, when COVID hit, right before COVID hit, if you compare incomes in February of 2020 and you look at them at the peak in March of 2021, then you had a 30% change in real incomes, real disposable personal income. Now, real disposable personal income is income adjusted for inflation and after tax. That's money in people's pockets that they can spend. You had a 30% expansion of that on an annualized basis of that real disposable personal income from March 2020 to March 2021. So in 1 year, you raised incomes by 30%. Now, even if you look at it now, that real disposable personal income is still trending about 7% higher than it was pre-COVID. So households have plenty of income and they've got balance sheets that are very healthy too, because a lot of people during COVID paid down their credit card balances. They did a lot of things to improve their balance sheets. They also saved a lot. They've got a lot more cash on hand now. So the second thing, the conclusion we draw from this is that inventories, they rose last year, but that's already been worked off. Look, Target and Walmart and all the retailers that had excess inventory, they did what they always do. Look, it's not like they haven't ever done this before. So what do? They take all these goods and they ship them off to to places like TJX, TJ Maxx, or Ross stores, or some of the other places that do that. What they do is they buy excess inventory and sell it at a discount. So it's a normal process. It's happened before. They knew what to do, and so those inventories are gone. So now, that means that you're going to have to do some production. You're going to have to do something to get goods back on the shelves. So COVID produced these changes in the economy, and these were big changes. And it looks to me like, because they're an extension of a previous trend, I think they're durable. I think they're going to continue. And I'll get to a little bit about why I think that's true too. And I would also say too that a lot of this has to do with work from home. People found themselves in their houses. They had to do things. They had to upgrade their house. They found that you spend a lot more time in the house. You find things you don't like, and so they fixed them. So that if you get people, so I guess the question is, if you get people returning to the office, and there is a big push right now from companies to get people back in the office, by the way, is that going to affect these consumption trends? Well, I don't think so. Because even if you do get a lot of return to office, you're still going to have some form of hybrid work. People like the working from home. They just don't like working from home all the time. And companies, they don't really like people working from home all the time either. They don't think they're as productive. But if they can get them in the office 3 days a week, 4 days a week, that's fine. They can live with that. And they'll let them have that day or a day or two working from home. So I don't think that these changes that people made in their lifestyle are going to change all that much. So what are the investment implications of this? What does this mean economically? What does it mean for investments? Well, it means that inventories are lean. So consumption, if it continues at the current pace, you're going to have a pickup in production for things that are made domestically, and a pickup in imports for those goods that we tend to import. And that could be televisions or lots of different things. And by the way, it doesn't really matter where they come from. I know there's this big thing about China versus the US and so forth, but that's not relevant to what we're talking about. It doesn't matter whether the TVs come from Mexico or China. We're going to need TVs, is the point. And so we saw that already in September. August to September, imports were up 2.2%. And imports are also well above where they were pre-COVID. I didn't show that chart, but imports also spiked a lot during COVID and during the shutdown. And they went sideways, just like the goods production. If you look at that chart, they look very similar, where the goods production flattened out and now it's turning higher. Well, that's the same thing that happened with imports. I would also say too that we've had this stagnant housing market for about a year now, where housing market activity has been really reduced because of higher interest rates. But the housing market is going to recover. It's going to normalize in one way or another. Either mortgage rates are going to come down, or people are just going to get accustomed to it, and they're going to go back to buying houses because they got to have a place to live. And they'll what people will do, everybody adjusts. And it's one of the things that bugs me about people that look at the economy in this static way. They think, oh, well, that's the way it is, and that nobody's going to change. It's like, well, no, that's not the way the world works. If you're out there and you're looking for a house, you got to have a house. You're making a move because of your job or whatever the heck it is. Maybe 2 years ago you could have bought a $500,000 home. Maybe now you can only buy a $350,000 home. Well, you know what? You're going to have to adjust, and people will. My point is that we have this reduced activity, and what happens when somebody buys a house, whether it's an existing home or a new home, is that, what do? Well, they go out and they buy furniture, they buy curtains, they buy all paint, they buy all kinds of things to work on that house, or to furnish that house, or to get it in the shape that they want it. So that spending, if you get the housing market to recover, we're going to see that recover too. I also think too that this another reason I think this is going to persist is I think a lot of this has to do with price. Look, services, and you guys have seen this, I'm sure, in your local restaurants and so forth. We know that the service businesses are continuing to have problems finding workers. And we know too that those workers are demanding higher pay now, and they're getting it. A lot of restaurants are paying upwards of $20 an hour now. Plus, whatever it depends on the restaurant, whether it's, that or whether it's tips or whatever it is. But my point is that they've had to pay more to get people in the jobs, and services prices have gone up. And there's no doubt about going and looking at the menu at the local restaurant. prices have gone up a lot. But on the other side, goods prices are going to continue to be held in check by globalization. Look, we're not going to start making televisions here in the United States. We're not going to, there's a lot of goods that are always going to be imported because we just can't make them in a cost-effective way here in the United States, clothing and things like that. So the goods side of the economy, prices are going to continue to be held in check by globalization, by imports, whereas the services side is going to be more affected by prices. And if prices go up on the service side and they stay steady or fall on the goods side, I think you know what's going to happen. It's not rocket science. It's just supply and demand. That's what what I wanted to talk about. Just, we've seen these changes in the consumption patterns. I think they're going to continue. And I think there are implications for the economy. So I don't know, none of these things are going to go in a straight line. Everybody seems to be very worried about the economy again. But as you can see with inventory levels where they are, at least from a consumption standpoint, there's probably not a lot to worry about.
If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you'll know when we post new information. You can also subscribe to our free newsletter at alhambrapartners.com/commentary analysis.